I often find the concept of hype to be bad. Yeah, sometimes hyping yourself up results in the end product being even more enjoyable, but when it breaks bad, even a truly good thing might become soured. Deathloop by Microsoft's Bethesda's Arcane Studios is a PC and Sony PlayStation 5 exclusive that was released in September of 2021. Deathloop wound up being one of the few games Microsoft put out on their rival's platform due to pre-existing agreements before the megaculture monolith began eating up any studio it could spend money on. As such, Bethesda and Arcane are now owned by Microsoft, and Deathloop may very well be the last game Arcane develops for the PlayStation. So naturally, I decided this be the time I finally try out those Arcane games. I've heard a lot of their earlier work, specifically the Dishonored games and the Prey remake. I liked the style of Dishonored and the gameplay seemed cool enough, but I just never had enough motivation to try it out. I heard just as much good about Prey and its DLC Mooncrash, but I do not play spooky games and will not touch it with a 6-foot pole. So why Deathloop then? Well, it looked cool. The mid-60s aesthetic was fun, the trailer music was very stylistic, the protagonists had good dialogue, and I always love a good time loop game. From the first time I saw it, I was intrigued. Then the game came out and so many video game critics, many of which I can generally trust, loved it. The game jumped way up on my must-play list. Deathloop is about a guy named Colt Van. One day he finds himself being brutally stabbed by Juliana Blake, only to wake up hungover on a beach the morning prior. After some conversations with Juliana and just reading floating text that appears around him, Colt learns what's going on. He is in a time loop that was created by 8 eccentric weirdos, but only he and Juliana retain their memories from loop to loop. To break the loop and escape, he'll need to kill every single one of the visionaries in a single loop. So over the course of 4 time periods within 4 different areas, Colt has to track down each visionary and learn the most optimal way to off them. Doing so is easy to understand, but hard to explain. The game consists of 4 different areas, each part of the island Black Reef that is stuck in the loop. Colt can travel between each of these areas via his secret tunnels. At the start of the loop, the first area will be morning. Then when Colt leaves that area and goes back to his tunnel, the next area he chooses will be noon. Then the next afternoon, and then finally night. Heading back to the tunnel at night restarts the loop once more. Or, of course, dying does that too. Each area is filled with Eternalists, or basically cultists for the 8 aforementioned visionaries. These Eternalists are generally out to party, but at the start of each day, Juliana warns them that Colt is trying to break the loop. So now they've all got guns and are out to get him too. And the level design of these areas is one of the highlights of Deathloop. Each area of each time period has the same general geography, but small things change throughout the day. Eternalists vary in number and location, sometimes entire structures move or are constructed or destroyed. Time of course moves along and each area gets progressively snowier as a storm system comes in. And learning each of these areas, learning where the visionaries appear, learning where clumps of Eternalists usually hang out, and learning the best way to sneak through unseen was really fun. However, each area that has a visionary present opens you up to being invaded by an alternate timeline Juliana. She's got a similar loadout as Colt, can disguise herself as any other NPC, but can only die once. If you're playing offline, it'll be an AI, but online she can be controlled by random people from the internet, or by those on your friends list. This also means that shortly into the campaign, you yourself can play as Juliana and invade other people's games too. I didn't do too much with this feature, I'll explain why later on. To defend himself, Colt has 2 main things: guns, and the ability to die twice before a third, permanent death. This power comes from this thing called a slab. This death slab is Colt's main power, and most other visionaries have their own unique slabs too. After killing them, Colt is able to harvest these slabs and use them himself. These slabs come in a few flavors, one makes you stronger, another lets you levitate people. By using these powers, Colt's power meter drains and he'll be unable to use anything else until it recharges. The 2 I mainly used allowed me to teleport a short distance and become invisible. Either looted off visionaries or just found laying around, guns are the main gameplay mechanic of Deathloop. There are a handful of different types of guns, from submachine guns to pistols to rifles. These guns have different rarities, from gray bad weapons that jam often, up to purple great and gold unique. Each weapon can also hold a few trinkets. These trinkets upgrade the weapon ever so slightly, like having a better range or doing more damage. Colt himself can equip trinkets too. These give him benefits like double jumping, or more health, or more power, or being super quiet. These 4 just so happen to be my regular loadout. All the trinkets in the game have the same rarity as the weapons. As the rarity goes up, the better the trinket is. This is still a time loop game, so everything you pick up during the loop goes away the next morning. But after a few hours in-game, Colt unlocks the ability to suck up this stuff called residuum. This stuff is basically time loop juice, and by utilizing this juice, Colt is able to infuse weapons, slabs, and trinkets to keep them from loop to loop. Residuum can be found in objects around the world that look glitchy, as well as in the corpses of the visionaries Colt has killed. Aside from guns and superpowers, Colt has a few other ways of interacting with the world. The one I used probably the most was his big ol' knife. Being bad at first-person shooters, I found myself sneaking around and stabbing folks in the back a lot. Or if I'm panicking in a gunfight, just run up to them and start slashing, hoping to get them faster than they can shoot me. This often didn't work out in my favor. He also has a few grenades each loop which can be toggled to proximity mines. This is not communicated well. And the most versatile tool is his Hakama Jig. No, I'm not being funny, it is actually called the Hakama Jig. This combination radio hacking device is how Colt mainly speaks with Juliana, and how he sneaks around Blackreef. He can hack turrets to make them shoot Eternalists, hack alarms to let him go undetected, hack doors to open, hack telephones to ring, and hack radios of the Eternalists so they can't call back up. Later trinkets even allow him to hack proximity mines. It's a very versatile tool, and for those wanting to go in quiet, a very important one too. My biggest complaint with Deathloop is the time loop interaction. There are a couple moments where Colt can do something that will take effect later in the loop. And they are all so minor, most people will miss them entirely. For instance, in one level at noon, you can find a hand crank. If you put it in a specific spot in the afternoon, it'll still be there, and you can do something with it. The thing it does is so completely, entirely optional that when I did it, I was actually mad. I didn't get an achievement, I didn't get anyone remarking that I did it, I didn't even get a good upgrade from it. It's just there to be there, and most of the things in the game are like this. Even worse, the few puzzles that actually rely on this time loop game being a time loop game are either wildly simple or way too convoluted. There are no satisfying puzzles in this game. Of the puzzles, there are 3 different types. There are small side puzzles that usually don't involve the time loop, and these reward collectibles like lore tidbits, good trinkets, or maybe a weapon. The other 2 are kept track of in the pause menu. Find all the good weapons and kill all the visionaries. And this menu takes away so much from the game. Now I understand that a good balance needs to be set when playing a time loop game. If the game doesn't hold your hand enough, many players will get lost and never finish. If the game holds your hand too much, then there's no sense of discovery, just following a checklist. The best time loop games like Outer Wilds or The Forgotten City do their best to balance it so players' discoveries matter, but if they get stuck, the in-game note tracker should help point them in the right direction. Deathloop grabs the player's hand and never lets go. These smaller puzzles are the closest this game gets to being truly great. A real fun example is a safe that is hidden in Updom. There are a few lines drawn on a map. Going to these locations reveals hidden numbers. Then mapping the numbers to the order written on the hint and putting it into the safe results in a bunch of residuum. Oftentimes there will be a few hints for these marked in Colt's journal, but they only point the player in the right direction, and overall these are really fun to figure out. Unfortunately, there are far too few of these puzzles, and even less that actually rely on this being a time loop game. The trackable missions leave no room to breathe whatsoever. Each objective is tracked and the player only needs to follow a dot to find what to do. This is to the effect where I did not need to do any problem solving whatsoever. For instance, most quests involve finding passwords. There will often be a dialogue hint to clue you where to find the password, but instead of the player listening to the dialogue and interpreting where to go next, this destination is marked in the quest log automatically. Then, after following the dot to this new destination, the player only needs to glance at the password and it's updated in the log. Technically, someone can skip every voice memo and read 0 documents because the game will always add it to the quest log. Sure, there's the premise that Colt needs to find how to kill each visionary, but really he's just heading to where the dot tells him to. And this problem is only exacerbated during the final mission. There is exactly one solution to beat the game, and the quest log tells you exactly how to do it every step of the way. The only real wiggle room is actually achieving the goal. And this goes back to the part of Deathloop I enjoyed the most, navigating and learning these levels. It's one thing to know exactly where the visionary is, it's another to actually kill them. Deciding how to deal with Eternalists, either going in quiet or going in loud and then scrabbling when this fan fails, was pretty fun. But not that fun. I never enjoyed the shooting. Admittedly, I'm not a first-person shooter kinda guy, but I never had fun with any of the weapons. The shooting was never that great. I did enjoy the sneaking and teleporting, but it wound up taking too long to get the coolest upgrades, so much of the game relied on me learning to shoot people and it was never enjoyable. The narrative of Deathloop is laughably bad. The core of it is told via Juliana and Colt's interactions at the top of each level, or in script cutscenes where Colt talks to past versions of himself. And the twists and turns this story takes sucks. It's never as bad as, say, 12 minutes, but it's also not good. Colt is a dunce. Multiple times throughout the story he is presented with what could be life-shaking information, and his only reaction ever is, well, can I shoot it? The only saving grace is the chemistry between Juliana and Colt. Their starting dialogues are always funny, and the actors did wonderful jobs with their performances. Colt isn't the only dunce in this game. Basically everyone who is not Juliana is stupid. Sure, some of them are written to be technical geniuses, but all the visionaries boil down to goofy comic book villains. With lore tidbits found throughout the game, we learn a lot about them, but none of this made them at all endearing. Everyone is incredibly one-note, and I felt nothing being tasked to kill them. No joy, no hesitation, they were all just glowing quest markers in the sky. And it didn't help that by the time I beat the game, I'd killed them all like a dozen times each. Finally, Deathloop is a good-looking game, but in general it whiffs aesthetically. The floating text around the world is a neat gimmick, but never looks cool enough. The design of the game isn't strongly the 60s either. It almost feels like the time era was chosen very late into development. Most of it could have been reskinned with a more modern design, and not much would change. The one thing that nails the 60s is the music. The levels each have their own themes that groove really well, and during combat they are given a more upbeat and heavy electric guitar version. While none of them stuck with me, and by the time I finished playing I was really tired of them, thematically they're perfect. My favorite pieces are the ones that are narratively by one of the visionaries, Frank Spicer, who is a washed-up pop star. The composers managed to nail the early 60s pop songs, and the few in-game wound up being actually pretty catchy. The end credit song is bad. It's trying to do a James Bond type thing, but wobbles between being a clear ripoff and a poorly inspired sound-alike. But re-listening to both the trailer themes Pitch Black and Down the Rabbit Hole are so much better than the actual end credits theme, and neither are used in-game. It's a shame how stylish those two songs were. The rest of the game could have used that flair. Deathloop is a good game. I recognize it as a good game, but it's not a great game. The levels were fun to explore to a point, but the hand-holding is too tight to really have fun learning them. And while some of the powers were fun, the reliance on first-person shooter combat was exhausting. I would have had a much better time with this game, but the hype beforehand really soured me on what otherwise would have been a solid time. Overall, I give Deathloop a... Wait, just one more thing. Completing this game is infuriating. Not only did so many of the achievements rely on me becoming good at the game, a lot of them become impossible if you don't have a PS Plus account. If you are playing the game offline, Juliana will invade 100% of the time. So the achievements that rely on never being seen or speedrunning always get interrupted because she will show up and she will find you. I literally bought PS Plus just to finish off the platinum because setting the game to friends only makes it so she never invades. But wait, there's more! Because there are achievements tied to playing as Juliana. But at this point, anyone still playing online as Colt is way too good for me. So I still have 2 achievements left to get the plat, and I can't get it. I'm so mad. I give Deathloop a someone please help me get the platinum trophy out of 10. No, actually I give it a Juliana out of 10. She's cool. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, maybe sub, maybe rate the video, maybe comment that Arcane's other games are much better, and if you do, I'd believe you. If you'd like to follow me on other social media, all my links are in the description. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.